Formed on one of our regular field trips, this is St Luke's Community History Group. This is no ordinary gathering. These folk belong to the last generation to call themselves Finsbury People. I'm Polly Mann and I've been leading the group for nearly 15 years. Most are now in their 80s and they've seen momentous changes during their lives. They get together to research their own stories and the stories of the area, but perhaps none are more dramatic than those of the present day. Few Londoners could tell you where Finsbury is today, but it was once a thriving London metropolitan borough with a unique character and identity all of its own. Where did it go, and what made Finsbury so special? This film tells the Finsbury story and captures some remarkable testimonies before they disappear forever.
Well, all work was manual.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, somebody had to build the country up after the war, and we were basically the first generation, really.
The Garrett Street is where
Whitbread was.
Whitbread used to keep all their horses down there. They're the stables.
My Granny Longer brought us both into the world. John came, I've got a better memory than you. John came in February and I came along a couple of months after in March. There's 2 months between John and me. John don't remember all these little things, but women do.
Remember all the family. There she is, look, that's my old gran. Can we move that over?
I know your Gran, I know her well.
There's my dad. There's my mum.
Oh yes, I know your mum. I used to see her when I worked in the Barbican.
I'm right down on the left-hand side.
That's you, isn't it?
There's me, look.
Is that you?
That's me, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you.
Got my best cap on.
Yeah, you ain't changed a lot. You're right.
Nicely
but them
dressed.
days we were well dressed and well looked after.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your dad and my dad were drinking partners.
A lot of people don't even know. I mean, most people couldn't, even when Finsbury was alive, didn't really recognise Finsbury was Finsbury. They thought they came down on one of the three main roads to get into London, and didn't realise between those roads there were areas of living and little communities. Finsbury was considered second most densely occupied borough in London. And then you're going back to Jack the Ripper times doing that. And the density was tremendous. You know, the sort of thing was round here, you had 12,000 people, and of those 12,000 people, only 200 had baths. And that was in the 1920s. Every floor, a family to every floor. More than a family to each floor.
Because I think the railway money down at that time was about £2.10 a week. Well, the rent was £2, 2 and 6. So we had to get the money from somewhere. I was on the ground floor, 5 children, mother and father. We were allowed to let rooms, so the top floors and the first floors were let to tenants. On the first floor, and they were clowns in the circus. On the top floor, we had all-in wrestlers. And down in the basement, we had a little back room there. I'll never forget it, it was old Mr. Clements. He used to write all day. He was another lodger, but it was profitable. Well, the wrestlers taught me how to wrestle. They used to throw me across the room.
One of the first Asian mayors in Britain, Dr. Katyal, saw the effects of deprivation on the health of the people who came to his surgery.
He was a friend of Gandhi. He'd taken Gandhi around London for the 1931, I think it was a Commonwealth conference, and he introduced Gandhi to Charlie Chaplin. Terribly important in the social and health policy in London. Airbrushed out of history.
Together with Finsbury Council leader Alderman Riley, Dr. Cattiel set up a team to bring the borough's disparate health provisions together under one roof. This was just part of a revolutionary Finsbury master plan to improve the lives of its citizens that included social housing, new libraries, health centres and bathing facilities. Finsbury approached architect Bertold Lubetkin, a Russian émigré whose modernist architecture was considered radical, if not revolutionary. The resulting Finsbury Health Centre was hugely influential, both as a piece of architecture and as a model health service.
It was a nice place to come actually, because to where we all lived in old houses with no bathrooms or anything, you walked in here and it was like, oh, you know, it was like a palace really. And we all sat around in a big circle in our knickers and our goggles, and we had the sun ray treatment. So that it was about 1944 really, because that's when we needed the extra sun, which we didn't really get at that time.
And certainly inside, because my doctors are here, and inside when you go into the consulting rooms, it's really rather nice. The Finsbury Health Centre is really special because it was the first ever purpose-built health centre in the country. And it was an inspiring piece of architecture because the quality of what was put together was just fantastic. The sense of light and air and spaciousness that was deliberately created. The architect Bertolt Lubetkin had this fundamental philosophy about all his work, which was that nothing was too good for ordinary people. And he wanted to build a health palace for the people of Finsbury.
I mean, when I go around there to have my feet done, I say to them, oh, that was there, the dentist was there. They had everything there. And then underneath was the fumigating centre, because they used to, when they used to move, the old war cry went out, don't forget to take the bugs with you.
The Finsbury Health Centre soon became a symbol of all that was good in modern Britain, as this wartime poster shows. But the fight with disease and neglect was being replaced by other conflicts.
I mean, I was 11 when the war broke out, so because my dad was a fruiterer,
Yeah.
I knew all about fruit. So, but they gave him when he was conscripted, he was 34 when they called him up.
Wow.
And they gave him 2 weeks to get rid of his business, everything. And I mean, he not only kept us, he kept his father as well, because it was my granddad's business really, but he was too old to take it on then.
Yeah.
And so my dad just got rid of everything.
After the bombing, from the school, they started evacuating children. And I went. I met some very nice people there. It was really nice. But I was only there for 14 days. Mum come down and she said, well, we might as well go together, like, you know. So we come back home.
3 weeks we was evacuated. I was 4, my sister was 2, and my young sister, my baby sister, was 3 weeks old.
We went to Leicester, and we wasn't far. It got bombed, part of it got bombed. And we was with a man and his wife who were school teachers, and they didn't know what to do. And you dived under the table.
Mm-hmm. My mum said, if we're going to get killed, we're going to get killed in London. And we came back.
Well, I didn't see any at wartime because I was evacuated in Buckinghamshire to a little village, Asheridge. And I think there we must have gone in the early 40s, 1940. And we came home, I think it was 1953. Well, my 2 sisters had gone late 39s. Then Molly and I, my younger sister, were going to be evacuated to Cornwall. And where Cathy and Margie had been evacuated, which was a beautiful house, and the people that owned that house came to visit my mum and dad and said that they had a tenant farmer, and would they think that they would be well looked after by the tenant farmer and his housekeeper, and how would my mum and dad like us two girls to go to live there where the four girls would be together. And it was a decision that was absolutely wonderful, and it made a different way of life for us four girls. Okay. It was Sir John Forsdyke, and he then was the director of the British Museum. We just lived an idyllic, happy childhood. I remember one particular time coming out of the cottage and Floyd saying to Molly and I, you see the sky, it's red. He said, that's where your parents are, and this is bombing, and you can see the red sky. I suppose he was trying to tell us, you know, the situation. He loved the two of us, but he didn't know at the end of that day what would be happening to us, because that must have been in the middle of the Blitz.
Yeah, we was in the shelter, but I can't remember much about the shelter. I was just sitting there, like, if you know what I mean. And we had to come out because the fireman said that it would be flooding because of the water they was putting on the top of the buildings, like, round the back of Moorgate. And I remember something coming out, and the first thing I see was these, all the windows alight, like, all round the frames of wood, they was all burning. Which was quite a spectacle for a young kid, like, you know, 7 years old. Of course, it was being gutted. I mean, bombed right the way down to St Paul's, more or less, you know.
The citizens of Finsbury headed for the shelters during air raids, some of them makeshift. They have vanished now, but Jean and Cecil searched for some signs of the entrance to their local shelter in King's Square.
It would have been, the entrance would have been more or less in front of us. Howell Street, went into King's Square, and then you had President Street there. There was the entrance to the park, wasn't it? Yeah. All you had was the steps. You went down the steps, and obviously all the bays were all under the park. My sister Eileen and Louis Lewis, her friend, they used to run the canteen down there. They used to do teas and coffees and bread and stuff. We had Bly, who was Colin's relation. She used to play the accordion. And we had an Aid to Russia concert where people played or got up and sang and things like that, and they was collecting money for it. So it was quite a community, even though it was down the shelter, because it was well laid out.
There was all bunk beds, and children, you know, was put to bed. But you got fleas. My mum used to have to delouse me every day. You know, because there's so many of you in the shelter.
I mean, I can remember coming out of my building and looking down Frowden Road and seeing St Paul's just lit up with a red sky where the city was alight. And I'll never forget that scene of St Paul's against a red background. And that was because the city was alight.
We sheltered in the Wenlock Brewery in the beer cellars. After the brewery shut down in the evening, we were allowed in with our bedding, and that's where we bedded down for the night. And then this rogue bomb dropped, and it dropped on the ammonia plant, and all the fumes seeped through the cellars where we were sleeping in the beer cellars. So there was a lot of panic, and there was 2 entrances, I believe, and I ran to one with my little cousin, who was 2 years old, because my aunt had a young baby in arms. It was everyone for themselves. I mean, we all got out separately, the whole family got out separately, but we didn't know who had survived until later on in the day. And it was just pure luck that we got out, because I chose one exit that it was a steep flight of stairs, but it was covered with bodies because people had fallen, stumbled as they were trying to get out. And it was just an awful ordeal, you know, just kind of, you were fighting for your life. Final toll was never established, nor was it publicised. It was kept quite secret. It wasn't, there was no news about it at all. It was never in the papers. And, I mean, people were dying even years after from the effects of the ammonia fumes.
He was a fireman and he worked at the Clerkenwell fire station. He was in the thick of it. They used to do the city. 1940, and there's my father. And at the back is taxis with the hoses on top. That's how they first started. They had no fire engines, they didn't have anything at all. My mum, of course, was, you know, always worried about him. Yeah. As children, you didn't think of it, did you, as children? I just wondered, you know, I used to say to my mum, why are they bombing us, you know? What have we done? I could never understand. Well, my father came in a taxi during the Blitz and when they were bombing the city, and he got us out and he took us to Parliament Hill Fields to get us away from the bombing, and everything was alight. The whole of the city was alight at the time, and he took us to Parliament Hill Fields, and we could see the flames at Parliament Hill Fields, all the city alight. It was horrendous.
You lived from day to day. You didn't know whether you were going to get bombed on that night and be there the next day. Nobody knew from day to day.
Happy birthday to you.
Roll the candles.
Happy birthday, dear Gladys. Happy birthday to you.
I was born 1920. And
you were married in 1940?
Yeah. And then I was evacuated with the war. He was a baby in arms then.
You came back because your mother was killed in
my mum was killed in Peary Street where I was born. And the eye hospital, it backed onto the flat she was in. And that's why I couldn't get no photos when I was little, because everything went. The place went, everything, and she got killed. But my brother, my oldest brother, he wouldn't let us go and see her. He said, no, remember Mum as she was.
I was in raids all the time, but the doodlebugs, we used to, being on the top floor, you could see them coming over. And when they stopped, you just prayed that it wasn't your turn, because they used to silently come down. As soon as it stopped, you knew that it would silently come down and hit wherever it was going. The street before us got hit. It was coming down, and we thought it was going to come and hit our estate, but it hit all the houses in the street before us, So, and it blew up, and all the bodies, and it was terrible. Yeah, the whole street demolished. As a child, I mean, it was terrifying. You know, when you think of a terrible, terrible thing, really, isn't it? Terrible thing.
And you made the most of your life. You made the most of your life every day.
You got up from that and you just got carried on with your day.
He went to North Africa and he was reported missing October 1942 at the Battle of Al Alamein, and I think he was killed in a minefield. My parents were absolutely devastated, particularly my mum, and she never really wanted to talk about it. But so many people, you know, locally here, the small community, they lost quite a lot of people, young men in the Second World War. So you all, up to a point, I suppose, grieved together.
Best banana, £1. English toffee, come on.
And before the war, next door to his stall, there was a pickle stall, and it was Jewish. But he used to have all these barrels with the pickled herrings in and the soused herring and everything. And then he married a Dutch woman, and they had 2 children. And she got homesick, so she wanted to go back to Holland. So they went back, and this was at the outbreak of war. They went back, he went with her. Well, they all finished up in a concentration camp. Oh, we knew this, we knew like through the grapevine, because his family still lived here. The only one that survived was him. He was Lou, his name was Lou. He was the only one that survived. And he came back and he tried hard to start again, like with his pickle stall in the market. He finished up committing suicide. Oh. He couldn't live with the thoughts that his wife and children had died and he'd survived.
When did you leave school?
15.
Yeah, I was 15.
Remember, it was labour intensive in those days.
Yes.
It was all manual. All work was manual.
Yes.
Yeah,
somebody had to build the country up after the war, and we were basically the first generation, really.
Yeah.
And it was all factory, like you say, manual factories.
Yeah.
Yes.
All these little firms all sprung up after the war, you know.
Well, I was 14 then, and Dad said, "We better get you a job." And I was walking down Beverden Street, which is Shoreditch, and there was this little factory, and it was called Testi and Sons. Italian immigrants, like, it was very nice people. Just the boy wanted up there, But they said we might as well try in here, boy. So I went in there, and I don't know why, I just stayed there. And I worked for that company till I was, about 74, 75. On non-stop, didn't work for anybody else. That was it. And seeing as it was after the war, there was a lot of industry to catch up with, like, you know. You had so many opportunities because there was people who was getting back on their feet, like, you know what I mean? And they used to come to our little company because it was easy, and they'd bring what they wanted. And in the end, I got fed up with work at 73, and I said to him, well, I'm going to pack up. He said, so am I. So the company packed up. Just like that. After about 150 years in the trade. We walked out the door and that was it.
1950, that was. I'm in the typing pool. Typing out the invoices. Oh, the company was Lillian Skinner's. I started as a junior in Linen Skinners, and then I got into the typing pool. All the orders used to come up through the pipe. And I left school on the Friday and I started work on the Monday. I didn't have any... I was very good. I mean, we had to work hard. It was a good firm to work for.
We had so many companies in this area.
Yeah.
I know you can never be out of work.
As well as City of London services like banking and insurance, Finsbury was packed with local established industries of all kinds: jewellers, watchmakers, brewers, manufacturing, printing. The rates ploughed in and Finsbury became a wealthy borough, essential to fund the visionary building programmes.
I mean, you could walk out of one job and go into another. Where did you work?
I was tailor. A tailor.
Was you a tailor? Who did you work for?
A little workshop in Exmouth Market.
Oh.
Yes, I went right through the trade. I was a tailor. I never liked to be called a tailoress. I was a tailor. Yeah. Not a dressmaker.
Yeah.
Not a machinist. I was a tailor.
I was under an accountant who taught me the fundamentals of accountancy, which put me in very good stead. I ended up having a wonderful job in the City of London, and I eventually got the freedom of the city, which was a very great honour from the company. My job was with the Carpenters Company, and so from an ordinary girl that went to work, I ended up having a very, very interesting job, which I was very lucky.
Because when I was young, you could get a job in the morning, and if you didn't like it, you'd go and find something else on the dinner time and start there in the dark afternoon. But when I was 51, it was quite different. I found a job at Barts Hospital after 3 months being out of work. I've only been out of work 3 months. And I worked right up till I was 68 at Barts. I had a mini stroke because I worked too hard. But there you go. I saved a couple of people's lives. They come in with suspected heart attack, and I recognised it straight away. And when the man pulled me up in the street afterwards, down the market, with him, he was with his wife, he pulled me up, he said, "You saved my life." And I went, "That's what I do." They got, 3 people got my job. They had to get me 3 people.
Once called the most innovative public housing of its time, Spa Green Estate is a testament to the vision of Finsbury Council and their relationship with Bertold Lubetkin. Spa Green was part of the Finsbury pre-war master plan, but it wasn't completed until 1949 because of the war. It must have seemed like a beacon of hope in the grey post-war landscape of austerity.
Oh, well, they come from far and wide to look at them because there was something new after the war. It was directly after the end of the war. And because everybody thought the whole of London was going to be like this, but this was really a one-off. But most of these blocks, these high-rise blocks around here, they all had modern amenities that, that we weren't used to. Everybody wanted to move into them.
No, it was a very good idea what he had. I do like it when I come in, I think, oh, I'm in. My brother couldn't wait to get in because of the bathroom. I mean, you never had those in the houses. And he couldn't wait to get in the bathroom. I tell you what, I think it's a very healthy place. It's a healthy flat. Because my dad, he died
68. But he had chronic bronchitis. In the end, it got worse. And he used to say, "Why don't you go around the garden or take a walk?" No, he preferred to sit in here. And my mum, she was sort of semi-bedridden type of thing. So for 6 years, she never went out of here.
Yeah, a good community. So a lot of the ideas that Lebetkin was exploring in his earlier projects were sort of rolled out here for council tenants, and a lot of the things that he'd learnt doing kind of luxury high-end apartments in Highgate were sort of recreated here on a more simple scale. And the mantra or the motto of the estate was "Nothing is too good for ordinary people," and I think that really rings true.
It was my sister's friend. Her brother moved in there when it first opened, and that was 1949. And we were still living in old houses, so to go in there, it was like to go into a palace, because they had the bathroom and a lovely kitchen with the waste sink disposal, and it was just like another world, really. And because to go up in the lift, which we'd never experienced, and it was such it was one chalk and cheese, really, but it was really lovely to just go into the first flats that looked like that. We hadn't seen anything like it.
I think it's really smart, it's really nice, isn't it? Looks very expensive. Might put in for an exchange.
It'd
be rather nice.
It would be nice, yeah.
The Finsbury Borough Council, way back in the 30s and 40s, were a very go-ahead council, but they also invested in very good social housing. There is the most wonderful building, Bevin Court, which was designed so beautifully. It has a central space that has a double helix staircase in it and mosaics round the ground floor. And even though it was built all those years ago, it's still a highly desirable place to live. And that old Finsbury Borough Council knew a thing or two about creating good things for the public, whether it was in health or housing or the general work of the council.
I spent the best years of my youth at Finsbury Town Hall, dancing every Saturday night. Yeah, the best years of my life.
I mean, I always say I come from Finsbury. I don't even think of Islington. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, where do they build like this now?
I thought it was wonderful. It was like nothing else I'd walked into. And so to come here for that little time was wonderful, you know, it was a different world.
Well, I think it's even better than I remember it, to be honest. I mean, when you used to come dancing, you probably didn't notice the scenery too much. And I think when you come and look at it now, it was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was a lovely place to come to dance. It only cost about a shilling to get in. And the boys used to stand one side of the hall, and we used to be the other. And then they used to walk across to ask you to dance. And if you didn't fancy them, you used to say, "Oh, I hope he's not going to ask me."
Impressive. I've got some photos here of it was.
Is that your mum?
That's my mum.
Oh, yeah, I remember you. I don't
That's
remember
Dad.
your mum.
And that's Chamberlain, that's me. There. My dad was a former carpenter for the Finsbury Borough Council, and the offices was across the road in the basement. And then he became a trade union official, which was full-time. So then that's when he became on the council. He was then elected to be mayor of Finsbury in 1959-1960.
Joseph Trotter Sr. was one of the last and most popular Finsbury mayors. Joe left his son these photographs which reveal some of the splendour of the old borough.
They're right to dance with the Lady Mayoress. My dad couldn't dance. Couldn't put 2 feet together. Oh, yeah.
But perhaps Joe made up for it in other ways. As chair of the Housing Committee, Joe and the council worked to improve housing and reduce housing shortages. They carried on a tradition of bold, innovative housing and public services.
I think that was the worst day's work when we amalgamated with Islington. I like Finsbury as Finsbury. Yeah, I grew up in Finsbury, I like Finsbury. Went all through the war in Finsbury and we come out the other side.
They were lucky in one sense. The people didn't have the money, the people didn't pay the money, but 3 or 4 streets are in the City of London and they provided 90% of the rate income, over 90% of the rate income. So it allowed the councillors to do things but without punishing the people with high rates.
When this film of Chapel Street, Finsbury's most popular market, was shot in 1965, the people of Finsbury were about to lose their council. Local government reorganisation of the 1960s signalled the end of the borough of Finsbury. Rates from businesses close to the city made the council all the more attractive for a takeover, and this is what happened in 1965. In April 1965, Finsbury Council gathered for a final historic meeting after 60 distinguished years of serving the people.
There it goes, and that's how it changes. You can put it all back. You can put the 1890s back as what it was, history, local. I was born here, I lived here all my life. You can put these back and find out, keep a sense of history. If you want a picture which shows you the changing world of London as we stand here with the football pitches, you've got a good building site over there.
The land is worth so much money now, isn't it? So they're taking down buildings, or they're building on top of buildings. There's one around here called Finsbury Tower that was a 12-storey building, and now they're putting another 12 stories on top of it. And that's what's been going on for the last 8-10 years around here. It's been construction all the time. I mean, the stress of it gets you down. To me, money laundering. That's all I can think of. I can't think where the money... No, it's not social housing, none of it.
It's not for people who live in the borough, because they wouldn't be able to afford the rents anyway. No. And they're just putting all these places up and pricing everybody out, really. And they're making it look an absolute eyesore. Yeah. I mean, you look at City Road and round there, it's awful. It's just tall blocks, and they're so ugly that it's taking all the character away from the area.
That block is 42 stories high. Them next to us a 1 and 2 bedroom starting at 650,000. Over the other side of the road, there's 2 other blocks there. And when Moorfields Eye Hospital go, that'll be a hotel, that will be. Oh, the amount of hotels that are down City Road is unbelievable. Even the old workhouse in Shoreditch, in Shepherdess Walk, has been converted. I don't know if it's offices or flats. The old workhouse. Oh yeah. The soup kitchen is an hotel.
Jo is a trustee of the St Luke's Community Centre, a charity rooted in Finsbury. If you were to look for Finsbury's heart and soul, you might find it here. St Luke's provides much needed facilities for our community, preserving some of the old Finsbury traditions of caring and sharing.
I know this centre has been a lifeline for Mum. It's kept her alive because I have to book up to go and visit her now because she's never home. She's always here. 3 times a week she spends here, and I've learned how to play boy.
The St Luke's art class proved to be a life changer for one of our own group.
Well, I went there because I'd lost my grandson. I told you he was 11 years of age, and he died one morning. And I took it rather badly. The doctors said, do something. I went there to do, and I started to do art, and I painted. She taught me how to paint, but I took it up and I paint, and these are some of the paintings that I do. Yeah, I got a tremor, and you lose yourself in painting. I don't shake when I paint. Good therapy.
And they used to call me Young Trotsky. He used to say, "Oh, you go following your father's footsteps" and things like that. But once upon a time, I used to say I didn't want to get involved with politics because I hardly used to see him, only except for a weekend. And he was on so many committees.
I got a job at Post Office headquarters on the occasion of a forthcoming list of birthday honours to submit your name to the Queen. Oh, I nearly fainted. And I thought, I wish my mum was here.
The original chains and everything, what happened to them?
Someone got into the mayor's office, and it was always you had a glass cabinet in there on show. And it got stolen, and they got stolen.
On Lever Street, where I was born, at 74 Lever Street, the block of flats that I live in now, Barnabas House, I live directly over where I would have been born, which is fantastic for me. And I can see my family all the time. They've all gone, all my sisters and brothers no longer, and my husband, but the memories are fantastic.
I think that's that.
Bye everybody.
Thanks for the coffee, Connie, by the way. Very nice.